Hello Internet, welcome back to America Month. It's July 4th, 2018, and I mark my celebration today by continuing to read this book, 1776 by David McCullough. I'm not quite as far along as it as I had hoped, but life is life, and laziness is laziness, even with things that you love, if they require a certain amount of effort. But anyway, all of that aside, so I was reading until I came to a point where I thought I would have something that I could comment on to put forward. And as I said in my previous video, The Art of Citizenship, I have developed certain sympathies for the British position at the time. That's not to say that I think that the British were correct. And by sympathies, I don't mean, agreement. I mean an understanding of where they were coming from. They wanted to hold on to the colonies. And there are some people who take this to an extreme degree, even American citizens that I've met. They've put forward the idea that the revolution was kind of a mistake of sorts, and the world would have been better off had it not happened. And sometimes the character of Washington is called into question by people of certain mindsets where they say, well, they didn't want to pay their taxes and they started a whole war over it. Again, that's not the extent that I take my sympathies for the English position. So here's my address to that point of, well, Washington and his ilk did this for selfish ends, and they were aristocrats and the like, which is true. They were of a certain aristocratic class in the colonies. He was a Virginia planter. But why would he risk all of that position? He lived probably far more comfortably than a lot of his countrymen. And by rebelling against England and going along with this whole plan, he lost quite a bit, and he risked quite a bit. Suppose he had lost the war instead of won it. What would have happened to him, And here is what he said as he was writing a letter home during the course of the war, where he was trying to get his mind off, talking about fixing up his house. This is from page 164 of this book by David McCullough. Of the war, he wrote that a few more days would likely bring matters to an issue one way or other. If he did not think the struggle just, nothing on earth could compensate for the loss of all my domestic happiness and requite for the load of business which constantly presses upon and deprives me of every enjoyment. So this war, like all wars throughout history, but especially these older wars, and 1776 is now long past, was horrible. Dysentery, all kinds of nastiness would be a constant worry. Also, medical technology was not what it is today. Even today, that people who fight wars go through horrific experiences. Now imagine going back a few hundred years and risking getting shot with a damned cannon and having half your body missing, or having something stuck in there and you're in a dirty, hot, unair-controlled room with people who don't even really have a grasp of germ theory pulling stuff out of you and giving you whiskey for your pain. So this is an ardent undertaking, and I think it's completely unfair to characterize this as some kind of power grab or a puerile sort of reasoning for not putting up with the British crown. Now, as for the British crown, King George III. It's very interesting because you would think of him as a kind of pompous monarch, especially if you're an American. And that doesn't seem to be the case. He wasn't foppish at all, according to the account in this book that I read. He liked Bach, which really warms me up to him because I love Bach. And his chief pleasure seems to have been his really plain-looking wife, who was, I think, some kind of German countess or whatever, all that royalty stuff. But anyway, So he was a pretty down-to-earth guy, and basically what position he was in, he had to keep control of the colonies because that's his job, to keep the Union of Britain intact. So was he really a villain? I don't think so. I think it was just one of those things where circumstances collided and there was no way to really reach an agreement, because when the colonists present their grievances before Parliament, there were certain parliamentary things and they were so distant they weren't really able to come to a consensus. And so eventually you get tired of being ruled from afar without representation, and you have a rebellion on your hands. And that rebellion is costly, and that's why people always repeat that phrase, freedom isn't free. Now, of course, that's now become a jingoism, and it's kind of an excuse for all sorts of military actions around the world that I don't think George Washington would be a fan of. He was very much what some people, I think, wrongly call isolationist. No, it's not wise to get involved in all of these intrigues. It just spreads you out too thinly, and you have to have a certain amount of resources to take care of stuff at home, which to me, again, and this is aside from history, this is my personal opinion, and it's not one I hold 100% just because it's such a complex topic, but the question of healthcare. There's people that say, okay, well, that's kind of socialist, etc. But at the same time, we pay a lot of taxes. And what's done with those taxes is that all kinds of companies, first of all, are given subsidies and they offshore trade and stuff. But anyway, we have military bases all over the world. So it's not communistic to pay for all of these wars that a good deal of citizens aren't even on board with, but it suddenly becomes socialistic, communistic to pay for healthcare. Now, whether or not single-payer healthcare is a good idea is a whole can of worms that is really beyond my area of expertise. I'm just addressing that one argument since we're talking about taxation. And it's not the fact that they were being taxed, it's the fact that they weren't being well represented. And what does well represented mean? And to come to terms with that requires a lot of study and focus and understanding of how our political system in the States works and how the world economy works and how everything kind of fits together. And that to me is the essence of citizenship and what we should be celebrating, the fact that we have at least some capacity now to affect change. Unfortunately, affecting change is always done at the ballot box. Everybody thinks, okay, well, you got to go and vote. Fine, that's fine, sure. That might be one of the big things that you can do, although I don't think it is. I think the biggest thing that you can do is to get informed, and stay active. And I don't really mean necessarily political activism with the signs. I mean building strong communities that understand the ethos of America. And I'll flesh that out more in the future, but I don't think it's that difficult of a concept. Just learn to think critically and value and understand the kind of system that we have in place, this democratic republic with a strong constitution that keeps a lot of the goofy things that we now see happening in Europe from happening over here. We do have our own problems, but again, it's a great country, and happy 4th of July to everybody. Goodbye.